Okay, so good morning again and welcome. So what we're going to do today, this is the first of 5 sessions on the mental factors. And the purpose of this comes from the yogacara tradition, and I'm of course going to talk about that. The purpose of this set of events, classes, whatever you want to call them, the purpose of this is to look at these mental factors as what shapes the way we experience the world. So it's to give us tools to understand these factors and therefore have a better sense of how we experience, how we shape our worlds, and to have tools to work with those. So once we see these mental factors, what do we do with that? There are wholesome factors that we want to cultivate, and there are unwholesome ones that we don't. We kind of want to not get caught up with those. So how can we look at them? How can we work with them to release ourselves, to move to this place of freedom? So that's the purpose of this. And I'm using the yogacara system for reasons that I think will become more clear as we move through this, because it takes a really interesting and very useful position, which is that all things are actually created by the mind. So we'll get into what that means. But by taking that posture, by looking at these factors in that way, there's approaches to working with them that make them very accessible. And it's also got a very useful list of 51 mental factors, which is a really good starting point for this. So we'll walk through those. Before we get into that, though, I want to step back and give this some context. Everything needs context. You need to understand why something comes into being and what its root is before you can really work with it. So I want to go through and give you context for this, which means a little bit of a history for where yogacara came from. And then we'll go through the basic doctrinal underpinnings, which is the shape within which these mental factors show up. Buddha taught 2,500 years, lived and taught about 2,500 years ago, died 2,400 years ago, whichever particular story you ascribe to. In the years after his death, none of his teachings were written down. So there was a diversity of teaching evolved. They're all still very connected. They were all these different diverging traditions, and they were largely diverging along lines of monastic codes, the Vinaya, rather than the Dharma, the doctrine. But there was some doctrinal differences emerging. But there were important differences, but not so important that they didn't all largely stay in touch with each other. So in the few hundred years after Buddha died, there was this divergence in the maybe 18, 20 different Buddhist schools. And the Vinaya was tweaked in each of these. So we had 18 or 20 different disciplinary codes, precept codes, monastic codes of behavior, and so forth that emerged. 5 of those still exist. I think one of them in Pali, and there are like 4 of them left in Chinese because they all ended up in China. So we had that happen. And as that was happening, the Abhidharma was being written. The Abhidharma was kind of the philosophy of Buddhism. It's where the doctrine and the Vinaya was taken, largely the doctrine, and it was codified. So if you read the Abhidharma, you'll find these lists of dharmas start appearing. So Buddha talked about the 18 sense realms. So eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. These are dharmas. Sight, sound, smell, taste, so forth. These and the sense consciousnesses. These are all identified as dharmas. So each of those 18 sense realms becomes a dharma. Nirvana becomes a dharma. The 5 elements, earth, water, fire, air, and space, become dharmas. So you have these lists start appearing with what they mean and how we practice with them and so forth. That's the Abhidharma. And of course, there were all these different Abhidharmas emerged. So in the around 100 BCE, 100 CE, a movement was emerging across the whole of Buddhism. It wasn't a large movement, but it was across all of these schools, which later moved into what we now call Mahayana Buddhism. But it was a movement against some of what was happening within some of those traditions, which is this codification of dharmas started reifying these dharmas, turning them into things that people were holding on to. So the first movement was the Prajnaparamita and the Madhyamaka movement to say, no, don't hold on to those. And that's the Heart Sutra we chant every Sunday. No eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. No sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. These are not things. Doesn't mean they don't exist, which is a mistake that can be made when we chant the Heart Sutra. It doesn't mean there's nothing there, but they are not things to hold on to. So that's the Madhyamaka tradition that emerged, and it's profoundly influential, of course. It shaped all of East Asian Buddhism. One thing that didn't happen with that tradition, which is it did not develop a practice tradition. It relied on the meditation, mindfulness, precepts, practices that came before it, but most particularly the meditation practices. It didn't develop its own infrastructure around that, which is really kind of interesting. It was really primarily a philosophical movement to reject the philosophy of the Abhidharma and relied on the practice underpinnings of the prior teachings. So then, 4th, 5th century, two people, Asanga and Vasubandhu, who were both originally practitioners within the more traditional Southern Asian practices. And actually, Vasubandhu wrote the Abhidharma Kosha, which is a massive treatise, which is an Abhidharma in that, out of that Pali Canon tradition, which is probably the most important Abhidharma teaching in East Asian Buddhism. It still exists and it's still used in Chan and other traditions in East Asia. But they shifted and they started adopting this Mahayana perspective. And they are the people who really founded this whole yogacara tradition. And what they did in founding this, they didn't piggyback on the Mahayana tradition as it was emerging on the Madhyamaka tradition, which didn't have a practice framework. They went back to the Abhidharma and they built yogacara on the Abhidharma. And then they built a practice environment around that. So all of this then moves forward into Chan and then out of Chan into Zen and all the other East Asian Buddhist traditions. The Abhidharma had identified, or the Abhidharma Kosha identified 75 dharmas. Yogacara identifies 100. So this is kind of like Spinal Tap, the amp that goes up to 11. You remember that story? Just that extra little bit of volume that you can turn on. And there are some really important things that happened within the Yogacara tradition. The first is the statement, the foundational statement. It's called Yogacara, but it's also Chittamatra or Vijnana Matra. Vijnana Matra is consciousness only. Chittamatra is mind only. So it's often known by these two. And so there are actually divergent Yogacara traditions which land on different nuanced versions of this. Not surprisingly, little details cause people to fragment and different traditions emerge. So it landed on mind only. And one of the consequences of that is it looks at our dukkha in an interesting bifurcated way, which is to say we have two basic directions for our dukkha. There's the self, the subject, and then there's the object. The subject is all our emotions, our feelings. It's this thing we think of as a me. So that's the self. And it's entirely mind constructed. And then there's our objects of perception. So the cushions and the mat, the people on Zoom and in the room, the bells, the mics, all of this stuff. These are the objects of perception. These are cognitive. These lead to cognitive vexations. They're called, the first are called emotive vexations and the second are cognitive. And the cognitive ones in this tradition are the ones that are harder to get rid of. We can deal with the self, but we've also got to deal with how we perceive the world. Because what we actually perceive out there is a construct that's central to this. And this will come up again and again and again as we go through this body of teachings. What's out there is actually a construct. So what happens is I see a cushion. All these photons hit the retina, and the retina, the nerve cells in the retina, then generate electrical signals that run up to the brain. And the brain interprets those electrical signals, and it does so by looking back at its store of information. It's got a whole history of looking at cushions and storing information. It thinks that's a cushion, that's not a cushion. This is a funny shape. It kind of fits in a cushion, it kind of doesn't. That's orange, that's brown. All of this history back here and the context within which cushions have been seen before. So it pulls on all of that. It drops this information, the information that's taken in, the electrical signals that it thinks are relevant, overlays them with all of this other information, and it comes up with a simulation of the world. 90% of that simulation, modern neurology tells us, 90% of that simulation isn't there. 90% of that simulation is the stored information that's being brought forward and overlaid. So we think we're seeing the world. We're not. Almost instantaneously, when the signals reach the brain does this overlay, this filtering, sorting, and overlay. I mean, I see circles and curves. There aren't circles and curves. The world doesn't have circles and curves. My mind has circles and curves because that's how it understands and works with the world. So almost instantaneously, this overlay is happening. So we're experiencing the world filtered through this overlay, and we're seeing a simulation without realizing it. So that's what yogacara sets up as the paradigm, and that's what this approach gives us the tools to work with. That's what this system is attacking. It's saying, this is how our vexations, how our dukkha, how our stress arises. Here's what we can do about that. So probably the great innovation of yogacara is to come up with the 8 levels of consciousness. So we've got 5 physical consciousness moments. You've got sight consciousness, eye consciousness, ear, nose, mouth, touch consciousness. What happens is you've got the subject, the eye, you've got the object, which is what I see, and then the consciousness arises when those two meet, the experience that arises when eye meets object. When ear meets sound, as ear consciousness arises. So these are the first 5 consciousnesses. And then we have 3 mind consciousnesses, which I'm going to talk through. These are not completely new. These did exist in the previous teachings, but they weren't passed out in the Pali teachings or in the Abhidharma in the way they're passed out in Yogacara. So if you read the old Pali suttas, you will find suttas that talk about these 3 levels of mind. They're all mentioned, but they're not analyzed in this way. So what's being done here is picking up on that and doing some really fresh things with it. So the first one is what we normally think of as just mind consciousness. And that is both perceptual and conceptual. And this is where this is the kind of the pivot point, is this consciousness. So it's perceptual in that these external factors land on it and it perceives them, it experiences them. So there's an actual consciousness that arises when these experiences land on the brain. There is actual perception that happens when stored memories resurface and are experienced. So there's actual experiencing going on in this sense consciousness. But the other thing that happens here that's very interesting and very different from the other senses is this thing called conception, which in this tradition, what that means is that's a cushion. That's a cushion. It's still a cushion. It's not moved. So the physical senses do not experience time. They don't experience space. The mind constructs that because the mind sees cushion, stores it away, and it stores it away as a historic event. So the mind has created an object, a potential object that is in the past, which isn't a real thing. It's something the mind has created by creating this mental object. So this conceptual structure of the mind is what creates this whole framework within which we live of past, present, future, self, other. This is all constructed within this conceptual layer of mind. The second layer of mind, called manas, is where the self starts showing up. It's where things get confused. Because none of what I've described so far requires a me sitting in the middle of this. This is just there's a sense organ up here, the brain, and it's just doing its thing and it's creating all of this stuff. This is just happening. It functions perfectly well without giving rise to a sense of a me. No need for me in the middle of this. The idea of cushions of past, present, and future works really well without me needing to have a me experiencing all of that. The idea of other people and seeing their suffering and wanting to step in and, the ability to step in and alleviate suffering works really well without there needing to be a me in the middle of that. And in actual fact, it works a lot better without there being a me in there because the self-interest gets in the way of how we interact with the world. There's just response to what's out there. It's a much cleaner response. No need for me. Manas is where that me shows up. That's the selfing. And it's where the mistake happens and all the problems start. The eighth layer of consciousness, which is called the alaya vijnana, storehouse consciousness, is what Thich Nhat Hanh talks about a lot. Seeds of karma, seeds are stored in this consciousness. Thich Nhat Hanh, by the way, he leveraged these yogacara teachings an awful lot. He took an awful lot from these. He also took some from the Huayan. His whole talk about interbeing, that's pure Huayan. So these are the two bodies of teaching that profoundly influenced Thich Nhat Hanh, and he really did a lovely job of making them accessible. But this itself says these are really important teachings because so much of what we think is Thich Nhat Hanh is precisely out of this yogacara teaching, and it's this concept of the storehouse consciousness. So what happens? Everything we do that we remember, we store this away, gets stored, and this is our karma. So I did this and it hurts, I store that away. I did this and it felt good, I store that away. I did this and now I've got two of those and I store that away. So these are seeds that can be pulled forward, watered and nurtured, and they become the way we experience the world. So if something we bring forward, we find it attractive, we bring that forward and we move towards that, and that could cause us to be kind to people or unkind to people. So it's this, the store of all of our past. Now in the Buddhist tradition, as you'll know, that past isn't just this lifetime, it's many, 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 many lifetimes. So this storehouse consciousness that we're carrying around like a rucksack on our back it's full of all of our past karma. All my past and harmful karma, born of beginnings, greed, anger, and ignorance, through body, speech, and mind, are now fully aware. It's all in that bag. All in that bag. So what happens naturally is the sixth consciousness receives inputs from the world, receives inputs from itself, and presents the experience. But everything it experiences is filtered through this alive vijnana. So everything is filtered through this history of past experience. And it's also filtered through this layer of self-identification, of selfing. So what that means is the way we experience the world is polluted by this incredibly convoluted, incredibly complicated, vast and ancient history of prior perceptions, which means we're not seeing clearly. And it's filtered through this lens of a me being in the middle of all of these experiences. Again, not being seen clearly. So our job as practitioners is to see these two filters very clearly and how they occlude everything. And then when we see through those clearly, we know what we have to do, and then we need the tools to start working on that. So these 8 consciousnesses, they come by a number of different names. One name that's quite common, that's quite colloquial, is they're called the mind kings, the 8 mind kings. Kings aren't kings. We could call them the 8 mind queens to be a little more inclusive. So queens are only queens if they have subjects. And the subjects are these 51 mental factors. They need these mental factors. And it's kind of like your hand. The 6 factors are like the palm of the hand, and the mental factors are like your fingers. They work together. You can't have the one without the other. Without the mind queens, the factors don't really exist. And without the factors, the mind queens don't really exist because they can't exist without content. And the path is ultimately to liberate them, and then they transform. At the end of the day, these are going to be transformed. So that's kind of the context. There is a lot more. There is more. There is actually a lot more. What I plan to do going forward is in each of these 5 sessions, I'm going to look a little more deeply in the different aspects of this. I'm going to talk, probably save it till the last one. I'll talk about the transformation and what these 8 consciousnesses transform into as we work with them when we purify them. So there are other levels of this philosophic and doctrinal backdrop that are helpful, but I don't want to get overly bogged down in them. So I'm going to move on to the factors. So we'll spread those out over the remaining 4 weeks. And the bulk of what I want to do is I want to work with the mental factors themselves, talk about the factors, how they work, what their function and what their function is, and how we can cultivate the wholesome ones and what we do with the unwholesome ones, whether there's an antidote for the unwholesome ones. So I've spent a lot of time talking about that. And my intention is to give you the tools to work with so you can pick a handful of these to work with over the period between these. So we've got 4 weeks between each of these. I am going to work through the 51 factors, but I'm also, these are written, so these factors, this system was written 1800 years ago, something like that, 1700 years ago. Relevant to the context and the culture in which it was written. But To the extent they had a word for trauma, they didn't use it in the way we use it right now. To the extent they had a word for depression, they didn't use it in the way we had right now. Loneliness, gratitude. These don't show up in this system of 51 mental factors. Depression, grief. So a system that doesn't include these is of limited use because number one, some of the factors we'll talk about, it's like, yeah, that's kind of interesting, but I'm not quite sure how it applies. And there's going to be these really important things that we bump into all the time today because our culture has shifted, the way we use language has shifted. So what I'm going to do is each class, I'm going to work through chunks of the traditional ones, and I'm going to finish up with probably 4 or 5 contemporary factors. So let's say 3 to 5 contemporary factors. So my expectation is we'll finish each of these with those contemporary factors as the ones that are the most meaningful you're to take away and work with between sessions. And that's going to make it really relevant. So that's the plan. So yogacara breaks these mental factors, the 51, up into groups. The first group are called the omnipresent factors. They're always here. I'm just going to give you an very, very quick overview of them so you know what you're getting into. So when I start talking through, you know how they fit in. The omnipresent factors, they are always here, whether you're asleep, whether you're paying attention, whether you're really concentrating on something, or whether you're sitting in meditation and intentionally working with them. They're always here. Just that's what this is about. They're always here. The next 5 are called the object ascertaining factors. These are mostly here. That in really deep sleep, probably not. They're called object ascertaining because they require an object. So they're subject-object oriented. They require an object. The 5 omnipresent factors do not. They're just always here. Then there are, and those are I'm going to talk through those 10 today. I won't give any more on those. Then there are 11 wholesome factors. The wholesome factors include faith, diligence, persistence, equanimity, non-harming. These are really positive things to cultivate. So being able to see them clearly, see when they arise, see how they're arising and how they're affecting us, and then to be able to work with them and cultivate them and nurture them is what we do with those, 11 of those. Then there are 6 root vexations, which of course, but you would expect them to include greed, anger, and ignorance. It also includes arrogance, afflictive views, and skeptical doubt. So those are 6 root vexations. And those are like the hardcore. This is where we really get caught up. These are underneath everything. So we'll talk about those next time. Oh no, we'll talk about the wholesome ones next time. Those are the time after. There are then 20 derivative vexations, which derive from one or more of those root vexations. So there are 20 of those. So like wrath would be one of those. Like that's a flavor of or drawn from anger. Right? So there's 20 of those. We'll work with those the following week. And then there are 4 kind of ambivalent ones. So analysis is one of those. Sleep. Sleep can be positive or it can be negative. It's just something that happens to our minds. So there are 4 of those, and we'll talk about those last week. And then, as I said, I've got like 20, I think I've 22, a list of 22 contemporary factors. That may change because I actually just came up with that one, but something like 20. So the five omnipresent factors, they are contact, feeling or sensation, Vedana, conceptualization, intention, and attention. Those are the five omnipresent mental factors. For those of you who are versed in the 12-link chain of causation, and you've really dug into that, these are going to sound somewhat familiar in two ways. So the 12-link chain of causation runs from ignorance through fabrication to consciousness, name and form, the five senses, and then contact, feeling, tone, and on up. Get to that second bit. Within that first step, before you get to consciousness and name and form, you have this second step right after ignorance called fabrication. In one of the Pali Suttas, Thanissaro Bhikkhu wrote a book which he calls The Shape of Suffering, which is his commentary on, it's a wonderful text. It's his commentary on the 12-link chain of causation. And he specifically identifies the sutra in that. I cannot remember which one it is. But these five factors underpin that second step in the 12-link chain of causation, this fabrication in the 12-link chain of causation, right after ignorance and before everything else happens, is actually these five omnipresent factors. So this is, these teachings all fit together. It's the same stuff showing up and being looked at differently. Then as you move further up, contact, well, it's the sixth. Contact is the sixth, right? Which is the first here. Contact. Feeling, tone is the seventh. Craving, clinging, and so forth. These all happen when you get into conceptualization, intention. So it's really following that 12-link chain of causation. Contact, that's just what happens when subject touches object. It just happens. It's neutral. There is no real content there. It's absolutely neutral. It just happens. Your eye, photons land, absolutely neutral. Then feeling happens. Feeling tone, Vedana. Feeling tones, they are positive, negative, or neutral. Drawn towards, pull away, or don't really notice them. So that's the place where traditionally our experience is most usefully attacked, is at that place before emotional valences start to build on it. So you've got that feeling. Then conceptualization starts happening. There's perception, the whole thing that leads into that's a cushion. That's pleasant, that's unpleasant. I don't want that. I want more of that. It's green. All of these things start getting built on top of this basic pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. Then the next one is intention. And intention doesn't have quite the same meaning we're used to in modern language. Intention is just that pull towards, or that withdraw, that move away from something. That's intention. Going in, coming out, holding on, rejecting. This is intention in this context, which is the root of our suffering, right? This is selfing. I want this, this becomes me. I don't want that. That's outside this definition of me. That's bad, this is good. That's where the problems start, intention. And then attention is the real jewel here, because our attention is something we can bring to bear on this and actually leads into really what's going to come afterwards. That attention allows us to see our intention and work with it. Why am I rejecting that? That's not skillful. That's causing suffering out there or suffering here or both, and both. Why am I holding on to this? Silly. There's no me to hold on to anything. So the attention actually leads into has the potential to lead to freedom. That gift of attention gives us something to work with that we can then turn into our practice. So a rather corny way of looking at these is contact delivers and then sensation registers. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. Contact delivers. It's just neutral. Package on the door. One of my favorite renditions of this is somebody was, this is in the Pali Canon, somebody was ragging on the Buddha at one point and getting cross with him and telling him he was an idiot and his teachings were junk. And the Buddha said, are you familiar with the idea of a gift? If somebody gives you something and you don't accept it, whose is it? Well, it's the giver's, of course. So if you offer me something and I don't receive it, whose is it? Well, it'd still be mine. Thank you for your gift. I don't wish to have that one. So the package arrived, just not received. Contact delivers absolutely neutral. Feeling registered, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Feeling registers it and sets the potential direction. If you receive that, conception fabricates, starts building the story, building the infrastructure. And then from there, I scribbled something down here and I can't read it. But intention, it's a cute little word that I can't remember. Intention is what sets the direction, whether we're going to move in or move out. Intention really grabs a hold of it and decides what to do with it. And then attention is what we have to work with. It says we can choose. So a nuance on the palm and fingers, this really is the hand with 5 fingers. The 5 fingers are always there. Those 5 are always there, whatever's going on. So you can think of your left hand as just, the left hand always has these 5, and the right hand has any number of the other mental factors, but the left hand always has these 5 factors. So you've got the 2 hands with these 5, and whichever ones you choose to attach to. 5 omnipresent. 5 object ascertaining. The first one of those generally translates as aspiration. The Sanskrit word or Pali word is chanda. So in a lot of the time that's translated as desire, but it's a subtle form of desire. It's not a desire that's about craving. It translates more as this is why it's aspiration. There's something wholesome about that form of being drawn to something, or potentially wholesome about it. In theistic religions, this is talked about the yearning for the divine, the love of God. This is that aspiration. It's a yearning. At this point, it's neutral, but it's got an object. It's got the object that we're yearning for. It's neutral as in it's not wholesome, it's not unwholesome, it's not got a direction at this point. It's just, could be either. The next one is appreciation. Having this yearning arises, and then appreciation also translated as resolve. That's the stronger move towards. It's like, okay, I want to quit smoking. I'm aware smoking's a bad habit. So that's the initial desire, the initial chanda, the initial aspiration. And then the resolve is, okay, I'm going to quit. I'm going to take the steps to quit. And then we come to shmrti, which is usually translated as mindfulness. And it's a translation that in our contemporary world has limitations. Because it's obviously just this, it's often just this, oh, just present moment awareness, la di da di da. I'm mindful, I'm present. That misses a lot out of the traditional meaning of this word. The word in context means something more like recollection. It's usually accompanied by two other words, ardency and alertness. Recollection is remembering. It's literally remembering. Ardency is it's associated with the appreciation or the resolve. It's this looking forward. So what do I do with this recollection? What's wholesome? What's unwholesome? What do I want to do with this? And the alertness is just the being present, which is what a lot of modern language around mindfulness just lands on. It's just this being here. But that misses out these other two aspects of it. This recollection, this smrti, has the potential to lead into the fourth element, which is samadhi, concentration. So smrti leads to the fourth of these object-dependent, object-ascertaining factors, samadhi, concentration. So that's the right understanding of smrti. Samadhi, concentration, and so within smrti there's a sense of clarity. There's a sense of openness within smrti to lead into this samadhi. And samadhi is also neutral. In a sense, we're always concentrating. Well, we are right now. We are all concentrating. Hopefully, you're all concentrating on what I'm talking about. You're concentrating. When you go out and you drive home, you'll be concentrating on the road, and then your mind will drift off, and you'll start thinking about something else. You'll start thinking about what you're going to have for lunch or what you're doing this evening. You're concentrating. That's what minds do. In the Noble Eightfold Path, the step 8 isn't samadhi, it's sama samadhi, right concentration. And the right is defined as something which leads it in this positive direction to lead to freedom. Concentration just happens. When there's an object, these object ascertaining factors come to life, concentration happens. What we do with that concentration, how we work with it, that matters. The fifth one is prajna. We normally think of that as wisdom, but in this sense, it's intelligence. Wisdom is purified prajna. That's prajna that we've worked on to turn it into wholesome prajna. But prajna, in a neutral sense, is just intelligence. So a good example would be a bank robber. You think you're a bank robber. They plan the job really, really well. They work with a team. It's flawless, absolutely flawless. They're good bank robbers, good as in their moral, ethical bank robbers, so they're not going to kill anybody. So they've designed it so they can do it when nobody's around, and they do it without hurting anybody. Really, really thoughtful. You've got your aspiration and your appreciation in that setup right there. And then you've got mindfulness as they execute the job. They're recalling all their plans. They're being really intentional about what's going on, and they're concentrating. Really focused on what they're doing. And they're bringing all of this intelligence to bear on the execution of this job, the heist. And it's perfect and flawless. And it hits headlines around the world. And 20 years later, nobody has any idea how they did it. There are movies along these kind of things, right? These 5 object ascertaining factors are all present in that, in spades. So these are neutral. What do we do with these is what matters. Okay, so this is the foundation we have to work with. These are the factors that are always there and the ones that are almost always there. I'm going to deal with the others down the road. What I want to do now is turn our attention to 4 contemporary factors. So I'll spend the rest of some time talking about the contemporary factors, and then we'll take a break and talk among ourselves. And I want to talk about them in a way that you can actually work with them. So I'll say these same things a couple of times as we go through this, but I want to just tee up the how we work with them first, and then we'll come back to that. So the how we work with them is, first off, these are all creations of mind. This is the foundation here. Everything you experience, whether it's an object out there, whether it's your emotions in here, it is a fabrication of your mind. The brain has never left the skull. Everything that happens in here is created in here. So the first thing we've got to do is we've got to turn our attention inwards. We normally focus outwards and say, there's a problem out there. This is broken. That's a bad person. That's a good person. That's something I want to go experience. And I'm being prevented for some reason. So the problem is always out there. It's not. I'm not saying there aren't things out there that need dealing with. There are. There's suffering out there. There's harm being caused. These are things we need to work with, things we need to deal with. But the problem is in here. In here. The problem is how we react. How we take these events that are fluid, that are impermanent, that are without any sense of self in them or in the recipient, and we turn them into concrete things. Turn them into things. That's the problem. And that happens here. So the first thing is we've got to turn the lens inward and look in here. And then the second thing is one of Guagu's root teachings. It's one of his teacher Sheng Yen's root teachings, which is expose, embrace, transform, and then release. Expose. So we turn in here and then we pay attention to what's actually happening here. We accept responsibility and we see how this emotion is arising. We really focus on what's coming up here. And when we do that, we then move into embracing it. It's like, okay, I see this, see it clearly. And I can see it's a result of a whole bunch of things that have happened that have trained and conditioned this body, this mind to respond in this way. That's just the way it is. It's just the way it's been wired. It doesn't mean it's good, doesn't mean it's bad. It's just what it is. So accept that. And once we've accepted it, then we can start to work with it. Habits can be changed. Once we see habits and we accept habits, these are deep in the rear brain and the limbic system. We bring them forward to the forebrain. They become conscious. Once they're conscious, we can start working with them. We can start retraining them. Expose, embrace, transform, and then there's just going to be this natural release that happens. So we look inward, problems here, not out there. Hui Nong said in the Platform Sutra, paraphrasing, I see only my own faults, not the faults of others, which is exactly what I'm just saying. To see a fault out there is actually a fault in here because it's a judgment imposed on the world. It's a judgment that doesn't actually exist. I've created this set of opinions that I'm imposing. That actually is a fault here. So we turn inwards, we expose, embrace, transform, release. And then the other one, which is going to be important as we work through these, there are specific ways of applying that process. Great generic process. We need to look at the particular factor in question and say, okay, so what happens here with this particular factor? What do I need to do with this particular factor to help me address it, help me work with it? Another way that I'll talk about working with these is looking at the three natures of yogacara. And I'll talk about these next week probably. But just to give you a flavor, within this system, yogacara talks about three natures. The first nature is the imagined nature. Totally what comes up in our mind and we take it as real. The cushion. Well, I think there's a thing called a cushion. It's not, but that's imagined. That's its imaginary nature. I'm feeling pretty contented right now. I think that's a thing. It's not. It's not a thing. It's just an arising. It's not a thing. Doesn't mean there's nothing here, but it's not a thing. So that's the imaginary nature. The second nature is the dependent nature. That cushion is made of buckwheat and fabric and cotton. Chad stitched it all together. A bunch of us, Chad mostly stuffed most of these, and some of us came together and stuffed all the others. That fabric was made in a factory. It's got a bunch of plastic in it, so it came out of dead trees that have fossilized underground. Lots of trucks and oil rigs and so forth involved in that, factories and all the rest of it, right? And the trees that were underground, they were originally trees, the sun, the water, the soil, the earth, the whole universe. And this earth is all stardust. The whole universe is in that cushion. Everything is completely interconnected with everything else. Nothing exists independently. This is the dependent nature. And then the third one is perfected, which is basically the awakened mind, how the awakened mind experiences everything in this totally fluid, open, relationship-oriented way with no self experiencing this. It's just this silent illumination. It's just the way the world really is. So these become tools that we can use. Another way that we frame that is we think of emptiness. Emptiness is something that can be reified. Emptiness is just a practice. Emptiness is a way to engage in the world, to practice. To see emptiness in things is to actually see the aliveness in things, to see the possibility of things actually being in the first place. Without emptiness, nothing could be. And so we're training ourselves to see that. So emptiness is actually just a practice. So these are just different ways we work with these. All right, so the first one of these factors I want to talk about is storytelling. That's what we do. As human beings, that's really what we do. It's what we've always done. But it's got particular nuances in our modern culture, and it's particularly strong. So modern language really affects this. So I talked about part of this actually at the beginning, which is the root part of it, which is 90% of what I think I'm experiencing, I'm actually not experiencing. It's the past. It's my history. So all that we experience, all that we think we experience, we're coming at it from a particular vantage point. The universe is incredible. There's all of us hanging around here. Each of us has a different perspective, a different vantage point, a different angle with which we're experiencing exactly the same thing, the same reality from all these different vantage points. Each time we experience, we're bringing a vantage point to bear. And we don't realize that. We think it's truth. It's not. It's a vantage point. And then there's all the baggage we bring forward and overlay. Getting into this proliferation, papancha. So what we do really, it really is literally like watching a movie or playing a video game. The way we live our lives is exactly like that. You think of watching a movie. I deal with playing a video game because these first-person games really get you right in it, but it's very similar to a video. First-person game, you've got the control in your hands, and you're playing along, and you've got this little icon, maybe the back of a head, or maybe you don't even have that. There's just the perspective, which is your perspective moving. But you're engaged in this game, and at first you probably recognize it's just me with the remote control, but before long, you're totally sucked in. There's no world out there. That screen, what's in that screen is real. That is your world. And what you're doing with the remote control, with those little bits and bytes, that is your reality. You're totally immersed in the game. When something goes wrong, it's, oh, you react very strongly and then catch it, immediately come back to yourself when that's happened. When you watch a movie, if it's a well-crafted movie, you'll go in there and you'll find that you'll start identifying with protagonists and antagonists, maybe one character in particular, but your emotional well-being becomes completely tied with what you perceive to be their emotional well-being. When they encounter something stressful, your heart rate accelerates. When they encounter something improperly imposed on them, you get angry. There's no objective reality here. And yet, our system is tuning into all of those cues and creating a self in the middle of this. Our lived experience is exactly the same. In reality, there is no self in the middle here. In reality, there is also just this sensory experience, which is absolutely neutral. It's just sensory experience. And that sensory experience includes allowing us to see suffering out there. Feeling compassion is also just a sensory experience, just something that happens. It's neutral. It's wholesome, but there's a point here that I'm trying to get, which is there's not a me in it. It's just arising. It's just arising is what I'm trying to get at. There's no me in there. It's just arising. So the storytelling is when we start to create this me and it becomes an identification with it. So modern examples would be somebody you say, I was traumatized by that. So yes, I mean that's language that 100 years ago would not have made any sense at all. Nobody would have understood what you were talking about. And there's a very real experience there of something landing and being profoundly harmful. But to say, I was traumatized by that, holds up an I, and the way that is framed sets up kind of a permanence and a self-other about this that creates a fixed situation and a sense of identity around this experience. There's something there that needs to be dealt with, but the storytelling is this perspective and this history that creates identity out of it. One we all do all the time. We have a sense of who we are. So when somebody asks us to engage in public speaking, say, "Oh, I'm not very good at that. I'm not very good at that at all." You've just latched onto a story. Um, I had an interesting one recently. I when I was maybe 8 or 10 years old, I had a very common experience, which is the world told me I wasn't any good at drawing. Couldn't draw. Very normal. Kids can all draw great. But because of the way we raise our children, they're great until they're like 5 or 7 years old. And then they're not taught to move beyond those stick drawings. So they get stuck there. That's what happened here. So because I didn't have anything in my life that moved me beyond that, when I was 10 years old, people would look at my drawing and say, "You're not very good at drawing, but you're good at adding up. Why don't you go do math instead?" So I did math and I did math at an advanced level and so forth. And it was because of that history. Well, I thought, I'm not sure I buy into that. So a few years ago, I got myself a couple of books. One I got to work with was drawing with the left side of. So it's the right side, but I'm trying to remember the title of the book. It's something like drawing on the right side of the brain is what the book's called. Drawing on the right side of the brain. And there's a bunch of exercises in there. And I worked like 3/4 of the way through the book over a period of a few weeks. I really didn't spend long with it. But over a few weeks, I came up with some drawings. Wow, did I really do that? I can draw. It's just, from this place, I could now actually take up drawing as a hobby and become quite competent. I'm not pretending I'd ever been selling pictures or anything, but I could become quite competent at drawing. But the story I had told myself until 5 years ago was, you can't draw. Can't sing. Same thing. I had experiences a few years ago where I started in an environment where a lot of singing was happening. I just found myself joining in and, oh, I can hold the key. My mum used to tell me, yeah, I'd love coming to watch you sing in the choir, Gareth, when I was same kind of age. I can always pick your voice out, she told me, because you're always just a little bit flat. Can't sing. So these are stories we tell ourselves. They're not reality. We don't need to be the prisoner of these. So what we do with these is we spot them coming up. This is the framework we work with. Expose. When we find ourselves caught in a story, when we find a story arising, say, there's one of those stories. I can choose to go with that because it's just expedient. I don't want to worry about it right now. But do I really want to believe you can't draw? Is that useful, or is that something I want to deal with? We can work with these stories and then go through the rest of the steps. Language really is a problem because English, we have one verb for to be. East Asian languages don't have the same kind of verb structure. They don't have this same sense of being. We've landed on it so strongly in English. It's a real problem. In Spanish, there are two verbs, estar and ser. Estar, estoy enfermo, means I'm sick, but it's from estar, which is impermanent. It means right now I'm sick, but it's not going to last. Soy hombre, I'm a man, permanent. Now, the valence between the two isn't always perfect, because your profession is described with ser, and your profession these days is clearly not permanent. But there's an important distinction in here, which is impermanence versus permanence in this state of being, and we land on permanent state of being in English. In French, you would say j'ai faim, I am hungry. It's literally I have hunger. In the Irish vernacular, you would say grief is upon me. Grief is upon me. So there's a sense of not being the thing, of the thing being something other that kind of floats through here as a kind of guest. So expose and then change our relationship with these. Storytelling underlies all of these others, all of these others. So the next one I'm going to talk about is grief, which is really profound. And really can be really disabling. Grief is the experience, is the response to the loss of someone, typically someone that is loved. It's a response to experiencing the impermanence of love. We want this love to be fixed, and it can't be. I believe that in circles of neuroscience and psychology and the like, that there is a related term which is called prolonged sadness, which is, whether that's correct or not, I don't know, but I think it is. But that gets at the root of this, which is grief can be just this momentary experience, but when we hold on to it, it becomes this extended sadness. It's that's the problem. This system is designed to experience grief. This system is designed to experience love, and therefore it's designed to experience grief, which is what happens when love is changed or lost. So grief is a really natural thing. Nothing wrong with grief. What we've got to watch out for is this storytelling around the experience. And through the storytelling, oh, this person's gone, it's never going to be the same again. I'll never find anybody like that. Whatever the relationship. It's this storytelling and fixing on it. There's an important somatic element here, which is the neurological wiring for grief and pain overlap. So there really is a physical element to grief. Doesn't change any of what I've said, but it just makes real that we do feel physically the grieving. If you think about this from a neurological perspective, oh, excuse me, from a yogacara perspective, my dad, loved my dad terribly, passed away, grieving. But the person I loved as my father actually isn't my father. The person I loved as my father is my perspective of who my father was. All my history with my dad, all my overlays. That's what really is going on with my love for my father. So that love is still here, right now, still here. It's changed. I don't have the physical object out there, but my life experiences, the way I experience the world, um, the belt I'm wearing, that's my dad's belt. Yeah. Often I've got a couple of my dad's coats and other things up. I'm just connected with him. So that love is still here. It's just changed. So we're holding on to something out there, this separation of me and something else, instead of just experiencing this love and experiencing the transformation of this love. So working with grief is all about recognizing the impermanence here. Allowing ourselves to be sad, because it is absolutely natural. To deny that is to neutralize ourselves as living beings. So experiencing sadness is really, really important. It's part of who we are. But recognizing it doesn't last, it changes. And also recognizing the constructed nature of it. That the sadness is, excuse me, the constructed nature of grief. The sadness is really natural. The grief is really natural. But the creation of this object is unnecessary. There's these flowing experiences that are just what it's about. Move on to the next one, anxiety. Big problem these days. Lots of people experience anxiety. Lots of prescription medications to help people deal with anxiety. Anxiety is, neuroscience would tell us, anxiety is what happens when the nervous system gets overloaded. Cortisol flooding the body, your physical reaction, chest tightens and so forth. Really useful if we're in the forest and we think there's a tiger. Not so useful when we've got an inbox with 10 emails that are all bombarding us from different places, our employer, some lawyer somewhere, the county for some bill, and some credit card company. Not so useful in that context. Problem is there's no tiger. And yet we react as if there's all these tigers out there. What's going on under the hood there? It's the same point about our response to change. The anxiety is the subject, the object of anxiety is threatening to change a status quo. So there's this clinging craving rejection going on here. So we began this, how to deal with it. We began this period this morning with this progressive body relaxation. Start at the crown of the head and work your way down, relaxing the body by parts. We can do this with anxiety too. We tend to think the mind comes first and then the body follows. And that can happen, but the other can also happen, and we can control the other. So if we relax the body, if we do a really good job of relaxing the body, start at the top of the head, relax on down, and let the weight drop as it naturally does with the out breaths, then we drop, we relax, and we ground. And the mind will follow that. And as the mind follows that relaxation, the mind can start seeing clearly. And once we can start to see clearly, we can start to unpack this. So relax, ground, and then start to engage. And with many of these factors, and this one in particular, engaging with a physical response can be really useful. So when you're anxious, ground, calm ground, then go wash the dishes. Go for a walk. Do some gardening. Get us in our body. Get us actually experiencing the world. One of the problems that underpins our modern society that leads to our current experience of this mind-generated world and our vexations is, as a society, we live so much in our heads. I suspect we all of us in our careers have spent a lot of time processing paper, doing stuff on computers, dealing with head stuff. For most of human history, people spent most of their days working with their hands, working in the fields, working on sewing clothes. It's a very embodied experience. We've changed that and moved ourselves right into our heads. So with a lot of these, the most valuable thing we can do is reverse that, intentionally come out of our heads, down into our bodies, ground, and then engage our bodies in something. Not something too physical, not something too stressful, but just an activity, a repetitive, simple activity. I'll stop there because I've talked a long while. Does anybody need a bio break? Let me press pause for right now. All right, folks, welcome back. So what we're going to do here is Q&A discussion. I pushed record again. So we're going to record this and I'm going to include it. And some people don't like showing up in the recording. So if you're on Zoom, so people in the room will not show up on Zoom. You can kind of see people from a distance there, but you can't really do anything with that. If you're on Zoom, then feel free to speak up, but your picture will show up and you'll show up. Or if you'd rather, you can just type a question in Zoom and I'll pick it up there. And I've just got this headset on, so I'm going to be relaying anything so everybody can hear everybody else. So questions, comments, reflections on what you've heard so far, folks. Winnie.
My first question is, when I'm extremely anxious about something, I find it hard to sit. It's easier for me to get rid of everything that needs to be done in terms of things that are causing me to be anxious. Then once my mind settles, then I can meditate, as compared to, okay, my mind is unsettled and I'm trying to.
So Winnie's question was, Winnie's comment was about how she deals with anxiety and finding it very difficult to deal with anxiety. Can't hear. Can anybody else hear?
No,
Yes,
we
I
can
can
hear. We could not hear Vinny.
Yeah, so I'm just
Yeah,
repeating the
right.
question.
Thank you.
So Winnie's question was about anxiety. She's talking about her experience with anxiety and having a hard time dealing with anxiety. So the way you're talking about it, a couple of thoughts. The first one is from the way you're looking at it. Yes, if you can deal with the issue, deal with it. So you look at what's going on. It's like, problem here. I'm anxious. Is this something I can deal with? There's a problem, potential problem. If you can deal with it, very simple terms, if there's a problem, you can fix it, no problem. If there's a problem and you can't fix it, no problem, because you can't do anything about it. There's not a problem. If you have the ability to take that approach, so first off, see it, if there's a problem, fix it. And if you then have the ability to say, I can't fix it, put it down, I'm good, that's great. Most people can't. And that's actually where the anxiety arises because you can't deal with it right now. It's the tiger that's not really there. It's the email from your boss that's just nagging. And it talks about what's going to happen after that and after that and after that, which is insoluble. So the anxiety normally arises with this stuff we can't resolve. That's why it happens. When that's the case, it's probably going to be hard to sit and meditate, to just settle in on just the breath. So don't. Calm the body first. Come into the body first. When you actually, so here's when you're dealing with something that happens, unfortunately, with meditation practice more often than it should, which is like it should never happen. But people with historical trauma, their bodies develop defense mechanisms over that trauma. So they've got all these layers of protection. When you sit in meditation, those layers kind of flake away. So they're sitting and staring at the wall and meditating, and they go and see the teacher, on a retreat, and they go talk to somebody. It's like, I'm starting to feel this trauma surfacing. It's okay. Go sit and face the wall some more. It'll go away. It won't. That triggers the trauma. And when it triggers, you're in a particularly vulnerable place, and it can stay there for a long time, take a really long time to put back in. So when that starts to happen, the proper response is stop meditating, do something in the body experience, wash the dishes, sweep the floors, go for walks, really embodied practice, calm physical activity. So don't try and jump straight into meditating. Don't try and do that. When you've got anxiety, it's all body. It's all body. The body's too energized. You're not going to be able to take that whole system down into that deep relaxation. Am I making sense? Is that helpful? Yeah. Yes. And you've got to, this is one of the things, this progressive body relaxation, part of what's going on there, where I'd say, raise your eyebrows, drop your eyebrows, raise your shoulders. And I didn't say it today, but sometimes, if you've got difficulty experiencing a part of the body, put your hand there so you can actually feel the abdomen rising and falling, chest rising and falling. We're learning to be, and then when you come out of it, rub the body and notice what you're doing, stay in touch with the somatic experience. Part of what that's doing is bringing us back into contact with the body. We are so top heavy in this culture. So many of us are so alienated from our body because of the way we've trained ourselves. Got to come back and be in contact with the body. So when you're engaging in these physical activities, washing the dishes, whatever, it's not mindlessly doing it. It's notice the texture of the dish, the soap, the warmth of the water. When you're walking, feet on the ground, motion of the legs. Really be experiencing the body when you're doing it, coming back into the body. And from that place, you start to be able to notice when the body is becoming more relaxed. And then you can move to more relaxed practices and ultimately into meditation. Right? Anyone else? Laura and then Cynthia. Let me see what we've got in the chat here. There may be things in chat. Okay, so Laura, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think a very good example, I find, this very interesting, and I think a very good example is me wanting to, I've talked to you about this, Gareth, but sing again and really experience pleasure with singing. And, you know, it's so important to me because it was really my first contact with spirituality, I believe, that I have
Hmm.
a spiritual relationship with singing. Um, and I just want to say that I've finally discovered after decades that there's that stories, all of the stories, there are so many layers of stories that are in place that, that feed into a somatic trigger.
Yes.
Somatic triggers keep it going, and it just felt very disillusioning, like there's no way out of it. And you know, I still am not practicing. I'm still not going. I know it's thinking, finding a way to conceptualize the whole thing about singing, which is very important because I can't even go, and whenever I try to sing, something seizes up many times. But the good news is that I've been beginning to, I just see that it's many layers of stories.
Yeah.
Um, but, those somatic triggers, my body remembers all the singing lessons I took to try to correct it. And it's felt like a knot, something you cannot untangle. So it's very complicated, what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Changing things. That's all. Just wanted to.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
And you said, the end of it, you said, I'm going to put you on mute again. So you don't have to get up and walk across your room. Um, you said something at the end there that I want to talk about a minute, which is it's a knot you can't, it's a knot that's difficult to untangle. You can untangle the knot. You absolutely can untangle the knot. But um, your point that it's complicated is right. You can untangle it, but you've got to see the knot. You've got to be able to look at it and slow down enough and have the fine tuning to be able to untangle those finely woven in threads. Um, and to do that, what you're doing is you're looking at the tangle is the story. It's the way you have told this highly involved story and the way you've remembered this story in your body. So the untangling happens before conceptualizing. So it's not about reconceptualizing or laying concepts into your stories. It's about seeing the way that the concepts have created the stories, because that's the problem, right? And that's the easy trap to fall into in this top-heavy world where we're used to the stories. It's like, um, I'll find, I'll find me a better story. No, no. You can find a better story and you won't be quite as miserable. Maybe. Maybe you will be because maybe it's just profoundly unsatisfying to be in a better story because you want to be free. Um, the path is to get out of the stories, is to get out of that layer, which is solidifying these utterly transient experiences into things. And the concepts are things. That's the problem. Once something becomes a concept, it's a thing. And you're already stuck. Right? So we've got to see that happening and be able to let those go. Cynthia, you had something.
Yes. In the whole scheme of everything you've talked about today, which is fabulous, this is minor, but it's something that I keep getting stopped on. and maybe it's just really minor, but the feeling tones versus the hindrances versus the roots of the hindrances, which I think are fetters. Do feeling tones and fetters come from different places? Maybe it doesn't matter, but as I'm reading and studying, I keep getting stopped on these minor details. So I wondered if you had something to say about that.
Yes. Thank you. It's actually a great question, because one of the things that happens in Buddhism is we end up with all of these lists,
Yes.
all of these things to work with, and in different contexts, in different cultures, they actually get used differently. So the big one, perhaps one of the most tricky ones, is emptiness. In the context of the Pali Canon, emptiness is used to mean the absence of something. So if you look, for example, at the Chula Sutta, you start with it's stepping through the jhanas, the absorption states, essentially. And you start with awareness of the forest, it becomes awareness of the ground, becomes awareness of space, becomes awareness of consciousness, of no-thingness, and so on. And then you come all the way back to just the senses, just experiencing at the senses. Right? In each of those steps, what's happening is he's leaving the previous one behind. So in that context, emptiness, when you reach the realm of space, is no earth element. When you reach the realm of consciousness, is no space. Actually, I got this wrong around, but you get the point. In that context, that's what emptiness means. When you get into the Madhyamaka tradition, which, and this, well, actually, let's stick with the Madhyamaka tradition. When you get to the Madhyamaka tradition, emptiness is the insubstantiality of a thing. It's a different meaning. So the words actually mean different things in different contexts. The two teachings line up. You've got the same things being taught in the different contexts, but the language around them is different. So it's very easy to get confused around the lists and the words because they end up in different places. Okay? The hindrances and the fetters are actually closely related. The language around the hindrances, generally folks talk about 5 hindrances, and they're things that obstruct our meditation practice. So like anger would be a hindrance. Greed would be a hindrance. Doubt would be a hindrance. These are hindrances because when they come up, these experiences come up in our practice, they obstruct our ability to engage in practice. And there are specific antidotes recommended for each of those hindrances in our practice. And these are ways to still the mind, to engage in shamatha. So meditation on corpses, breathing meditation, qualities of the Buddha, these are antidotes for different hindrances. The fetters, these are the things that we turn into a self. So it's used in a different context. So the fetters, in the Pali tradition, you're released from the first 5 fetters at the point you become a stream enterer. So these are the things we get hooked on that we turn into a me. There's an overlap there, sure. There's an overlap there, but they're not looking at the same, they're not coming at the same point. One is a set of obstacles in our meditation. The other is something we reify into a me. And there are layers of that, incrementally subtle layers of that. So you've rid yourself of the first 5, and that's the first real experience of awakening. But there's still stuff you're holding on to. So you need to get rid of the others as you progress. To get rid of, there's 10 hindrances, 10 fetters recognized. What was your third one that comes back to this? I'm sorry, Cynthia.
Feeling tones.
Feeling tones, thank you. Feeling tones, I use that in 2 different ways. And I'm following Guagu in the second of these. The first way is the Pali word is Vedana, which is, it has this very, very specific meaning, very specific. When there's contact at a sense gate, it's got no content. And then the content is created with this feeling tone. This feeling tone is positive, negative, or neutral. Positive escalates on up into craving and clinging. Negative escalates up into rejection and aversion. Neutral escalates through ignorance and delusion. So it's got that very, very specific meaning. And it's just that first mental experience, that first mind experience, out of which all of this stuff arises. It's the root, all of this stuff in a sense. The other way I use it, because I can't think of a better word for it, is when we did that initial progressive body scan and relaxation, progressive body relaxation, settling in. Said, okay, so now we've relaxed the body down to the ground, grounded, check back in with your overall feeling tone, should be feeling content. What I didn't say at the beginning, and I should have said, is a fundamental to all of this body of teachings, is that these mental factors, they establish how we experience the world, and that is the feeling tone. So if you've got this feeling tone of contentment, you experience the world one way. If you've got a feeling tone of anger or irritation, you'll experience the world another way. If you've got a feeling tone of gratitude, you experience it in yet another way. So working with these mental factors, and the same event in each of those cases will cause you to respond completely differently. If you're feeling content and somebody does something you might find unpleasant, you'd say, it doesn't matter, no big deal. You're probably having a really bad day. Tell you what, why don't I buy you a cup of coffee? If you're irritated or angry, you'd probably shout at them. Very different, right? So a lot of what we're doing here is, in working with these mental factors, is precisely shaping that feeling tone. Because if the mental factor of anger arises, it colors everything. So we have to learn to deal with it, to cause it to calm, so we can bring contentment back. Because only when we can do that can we experience the world in a pleasant way. Can we experience the world in a way where we don't cause harm here or there? And a lot of that is why to a lot of these, the response of grounding, of calming the body and grounding, brings that feeling of contentment back. It calms the experience in that negative feeling tone, brings us back to this place where there's a more contented, somatic, embodied experience. That's then the feeling tone through which we experience, through which we filter the world. Make sense?
Yes. So the feeling tone affects the mental factors. It comes below, behind the mental factors.
You've got a feedback loop going on here.
Oh.
You've got a feedback loop. So the mental factors come in and they're how we see the world, but then they become the feeling tone, right?
Okay.
And so we work with the body to change the feeling tones.
Okay.
Right? Because what we're recognizing is all of this is mind generated. All of this is constructed in the mind. And the way we work with the body allows us to shape those mental experiences, to reshape the mental experiences and get into this feedback loop where they calm down and we can come back to this contented feeling tone. Is that answering the question, Cynthia?
Mostly, yes, yes. I have to sit with it, but thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you're touching on is really the root of what we're doing here. It's recognizing that how we experience the world is entirely the result of these mental factors. They are what creates this filter, this feeling tone that colors everything, that shapes everything. So learning to recognize those and understand those, bringing in tools to help us shift them, allows us to change the way we experience the world and to liberate ourselves.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else? Hello, Elizabeth. Katie. Shmurti. Smrti. The R has a dot over it. It's the Sanskrit word. Yes, it's the same word. This Pali. I was just trying. I'd lost the Pali word, so thank you. Yes, Sati is Pali. Shmurti is Sanskrit. Thank you. Exactly. Yes. Neutral in this sense. So the question was, what happens when you react without feeling tone? So it's really, I think, pointing at the neutral feeling tone, right? Yeah. So yeah, neutral feeling tone means you're not even noticing it. Typically, what's happening is underneath that neutral feeling tone, there's really an embedded positive or negative. There's really a pleasant or unpleasant, but you're just not really noticing. You're not paying attention. If you really pay attention to neutral feeling tones, they're generally going to land one way or the other. So yeah, you're just wandering around in a state of ignorance, not paying attention really. Let me say one more thing before you, because um, the important corollary to this is when we work through this process, when we refine how we work with these mental factors and we release from these mental factors, then what happens is there's nobody there. There's just this arising of these sensory experiences, right? But there's nobody in the middle. There's no me in the middle of it. And so experience doesn't quite get to that, but that's totally different. In this first case where you're dealing with neutral, there's a me in the middle that is numb, that isn't tuned in enough to notice what's happening. That's deadening, right? In the second one, which is once you've been through this process and there's no me in the middle of this, then all the world is happening and it's incredible, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous. So there is contentment there. There's nobody who is content. There's nobody there experiencing it, but there's just this wonderful activity of the world. So it's a totally different. Yeah. The clarification. So yes, so the non-realized person, the ordinary schmuck wandering around the streets, stuck in their vexations, they'll find some things they really like, some things they really don't like, and they're derivative experiences from these positive and negative, pleasant, unpleasant feeling tones. And most of the world, they just don't notice. All the people walking by whose lives they're oblivious to, all the stuff that's happening that they're just unaware of, that's neutral feeling tone. That's just not paying attention. That's dull, deadened. The realized person, know me in the center of it. This is not remarkable or special. We all have this experience. We all natively have this. We just lose it and forget it. So when you gave birth to your kids, when one of your kids had their first great success at school or on the sports field or their first birthday or something like that. There's no you there. You can't say it's joy or it's not joy, but it's beautiful. It's wonderful. This is the world in its full richness. There's no me enjoying this. There's just wonder, amazement, presence, right? That's familiar. But when you say it's joy, you're putting a me back in the middle of it. The reason I picked those particularly emotive experiences is because there's total connection with your children there. There's no me in the middle of that. There's nobody experiencing. There's just the world is wonderful. It can happen when you're watching the sunrise over the Grand Canyon. You're just lost in it, completely lost in it. And then you're pulled back to this nonsense. Let's stay with Coco and then we'll come to Laura. So feeling tone relates specific to it can be very negative. Negative. It can be smothering, stultifying, dead. Feeling tone is language that relates to a me in the world. Feeling tone is something that's experienced. It's something that lands here and there's an experience of it. The second one, feeling tone is not a relevant word because there is no feeling tone of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. There's just the world is amazing. There's just this wonder, this awe, this beauty. There's no feeling tone there at all. It's in, and it's the experience you've had. Well, the feeling tones are what we have to work with to in order to be able to let go of them, basically. Just being stuck on the feeling tones takes us into getting caught in the world. Laura.
I understand everything that you're
Oh,
saying.
great, great. You can come here and teach it next week.
Except, a lot of all the concepts. But I get, it's interesting how anyway. Um, um, what I want to know is when we meditate, like with the feeling tones,
Mhm.
what is the process that happens that changes our experience? What is the process in our mind and in our body? Because you said, yeah, you said it's like with the singing, for instance. It's I've been seeing how my body, has the experience, the stories I tell myself. So, and that's how the transformation happens.
Yeah.
So I want to know what is I'm sure you're going to talk about that, the process in the body and mind.
Yeah. So we're getting caught up on feeling tones again, and we've got to be clear which one we're talking about. And I kind of lost it a little bit when I was talking with Coco, getting language crossing between the two. So the positive, negative, and neutral, these are feeling tone as in the the five omnipresent mental factors.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's where we're talking about those. And they're always there. They're just always there. As long as I'm here, they're always there. It's what we do with those. They're how the world comes into being. They're always there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Same with your conception. They're always there. So if we work with those in meditation, that's a very basic kind of meditation, a very simple kind of meditation. It's not easy, but simple, which is about noticing the arising of all of those feeling tones at sense gates. You would typically pick a sense gate to work with. Hearing, touch, whatever. You'd pick a sense gate, and you'd notice the arising at contact at the sense gates for pleasant or unpleasant feeling tone, and the tendency of that to escalate. And so you'd be using that to cut off this tendency for craving and clinging to arise. That's the way you'd work with those. What we're doing here actually is working with the other kind of feeling tone, which is what we're talking with Cynthia about, which is this overall sensation, the overall experience with which we filter the world. So if anger or non-harming or arrogance or diligence, if this is the feeling tone that's arrived, or if there's a cluster of feeling tones arising with those in them, some of those in them, those filter our experience of the world. So what we're doing here is we're picking up these 51 original factors, my 20 or so contemporary factors, and we're looking at how those arise in our experience, how they shape our experience, and how we can modify them, amplify the wholesome ones, manage which ones of the wholesome ones are coming forward at any given time, cause the unwholesome ones to deflate, prevent them from rising, prevent is too strong, but discourage them from rising, sort of lessen the extent to which they're going to arise in the future. So we're working with this whole cluster of these factors which manifest as this overall body tone, feeling tone. And we talked about 3 of them today, and we'll talk about a whole bunch more in future weeks. Actually, we talked about 13 of them today, didn't we? But a bunch more in future weeks. Anand.
Yeah, thank you, Gareth. It's a very nice area of exploration. I was, as listening to these 51 factors of mind, right? The formation. So I was thinking also about 12 links of 12 links of chain and the causation, right? In the 12 links, the practice is you break the chain. I think to actually to move towards the wholesome factor, or you basically break the chain, which you avoid doing unwholesome action, right? I was trying to see how these yogacara practice, is it different, or is it, I know there are a lot of factors, right? When you see all these groupings and everything, it's all happening at very quickly, right? Very in a fraction of a second, all of these things. So how do you stop and look at that, and how do you practice that? It's more, I think, looks like we have to do that in the real world, right? All of these you see in the real world, not on the cushion, at least for me. So on the cushion, you're more concentrated, and you are just concentrating on the mind. And there may not be much opportunity, but for all of these things in the real world, is more opportunity to practice that.
So if you find yourself, and let's try, if you're a burglar and you want to break into a house, You could wander around, you could look under the mat, look on the shelf above the door, and you find a spare key and you let yourself in. That's one way of breaking in. You could get a brick and throw it through a window. That's another way of breaking in. You could get a sawzall and cut a hole in the wall and go through the wall. That's another way of going in. You could land your sled on the roof and go down the chimney. That's another way of getting in. They have the same outcome, which is you're in the house. Totally different ways of getting there. The history of Buddhism, Buddhist teachings, the Dharma, is a history of taking this basic principle of freedom, and it's freedom from your own mind. The mind is our own mind is the trap, the sense of a me. So the teachings of Buddhism is about taking that same basic teaching of freedom and looking at how that is most effectively communicated in different cultural contexts, working on it in different cultural contexts. So in the Pali Canon, the Buddha had a number of different ways of approaching it. They connected, but working with the 12-link chain of causation was a specific way of approaching this, and breaking that chain at that particular link was a specific characterization and a specific way within that Pali Canon of approaching liberation. Working with the 5 aggregates and looking at the insubstantiality of these 5 heaps is another way of doing it. Totally different, but another way of doing it. Working with the Brahma Viharas. Right? Again, you can find connecting fibers between all of these, absolutely. But they're different approaches to the same truth, same outcome, different prescriptions. Yogacara is just a different prescription. It's going to the same place. But what it's doing, the rest is fairly straightforward. What working with dependent origination doing is it's paying close attention to the arising of thoughts and trying to intercept them at a particular point before they've escalated. So if Winnie's anxious and she can't meditate, it's not much use because she can't get to a place where she can see this. It's a particular approach. What Yogacara is doing is it's saying, well, if we look at the way our minds manifest, the way mind manifests, generally it's in with these lumps. Now, it's not holistic, never pretended to be the complete psychological analysis of the human being. It was purely, if you look at these 51 factors and work with these 51 factors, that's enough. Work with those, that'll take you to freedom. So it's a different approach. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Looks like it is more about understanding the mind.
Yes.
Right.
Understanding the mind is exactly what it's about.
Okay.
So it's understanding the mind. Understanding the mind then, first of all, it's understanding the architecture of how the mind works, which is the 8 consciousness framework. Underneath that, then looking at the kind of mental factors that arise within that. And then not just understanding how it works, but being able to work with it. So seeing how each of those factors behaves, what their function is, what an antidote for each of the unwholesome ones is, so you know how to work with it, to mitigate it, to cause it to subside.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, and then I'm going to check in and see if folks have had enough after this, because we'll be a little after noon. Elizabeth.
Well, I've enjoyed the last 22 minutes, so thank you. And I've enjoyed the questions that I can hear. And I thought that was a very good question, Anand, and it was an interesting answer, clear answer. I just wanted to say that an AT&T tech had to come out here, and squirrels chewed 6 of 8 fiber ports. There were 2 left. One is used by my neighbor, and the tech could find one good one.
Well, he
So
found one good one.
it
So you
took,
back up.
I'm grateful they could come on a Saturday morning when I called. So I just wanted to let you know.
Well, it's good to see you.
So yeah,
Glad,
good to
glad
see
it's fixed.
you.
It's good to see
And
you.
this is good stuff. This is really juicy. So you did not have any, it looks like you didn't have any handout on this.
I have had internet problems for the last couple of weeks myself, or for the last week myself. Only got it back yesterday. So I will be emailing out a handout probably Monday.
Okay, that sounds good. And then, okay, thank you.
All right, we're at noon. I'm here if anybody has any questions, but I don't want to keep you too long. It's been 2.5 hours. So anybody have anything, or should we wrap it up here? Let's wrap it up. Thank you all for being here, for spending your Saturday morning. It's wonderful to be with you, and hope to see you all soon. Have a great rest of the weekend.
Thank you all.
I hope to see some of you this afternoon for our chanting session, but we'll see, won't we?
Bye.
Yeah, sorry, I can't.